Hi, I'm Karen Beck-Dudley. I'm the Dean of the Levy School of Business at Santa Clara University. And I want to thank all of you online and in the studio audience for joining us today. This is our second web series coming from campus called InsideSCU. This series is promoting new initiatives and exciting stories from Santa Clara University. The topic of this episode is what is Silicon Valley's path forward with affordable housing? This is an incredibly large and complicated topic, and we really only have about 45 minutes together. So our goal is to share enough high-level information about the affordable housing situation in Silicon Valley to help provide some context, and then focus the conversation on what Santa Clara University is doing to address this issue. For those of you watching live on Facebook and LinkedIn, please post your comments and questions for the panelists during the second part of the webinar. And let's begin. So we are very lucky to have an excellent panel with us today, and I'll let each of them introduce themselves. Let's start out with you, CJ.
Thank you. I'm CJ Gaby. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Environmental Studies and Sciences, and I'm also the faculty representative on the university's Real Estate Advisory Board.
Great, thanks. Stan.
Hi, thanks for having me today. I'm Stan Jones, and I'm the Executive Managing Director of Institutional Property Advisors and been involved in housing for a number of years. Also on the Real Estate Advisory Board here at Santa Clara, and have two Broncos, two daughters that one graduated in the class of 16, and one that's here now as a junior. Both played on the soccer team, and that's kind of my connective point to the university.
Great, thanks. Soli.
Happy to be here today. I'm Soli Cayetano. I'm a senior finance major, sustainability minor. I am the co-president of the Real Estate Association here on campus, and been interning at Cushman & Wakefield for the past 2.5 years, and hopefully going to continue with them after graduation.
Great, thanks. Okay, well, let's begin. CJ, could you please help set the stage with some facts and figures and the extent of the affordable housing crisis here in Silicon Valley?
Sure. I hate to start us out on a dire note here.
Exactly.
But, what we really have in the Bay Area in terms of housing affordability is a mismatch between incomes and housing costs. So a few stats that help paint this picture are the median rent in San Francisco for a one-bedroom is around $3,600 a month. The median rent in San Jose is around $2,600 a month. So as you might imagine, many Bay Area residents are cost burdened. Something like nearly 1 in 2 renters is cost burdened, and 1 in 4 is severely cost burdened. So we have a situation in which people are really struggling to afford their housing. On the ownership side, we have a situation with median home prices above $1 million, and in some cases way above $1 million, and only about 1 in 5 Bay Area residents can afford to buy a home. So, I think we have Bay Area renters who are really struggling, and then first-time home buyers and some people who are moving to the area are also have a different set of housing affordability challenges.
Thanks. Stan, what else might be important for us to know about the extent of affordable housing crisis in Silicon Valley?
I think it's really a three-headed dragon, Karen. I think it's, you have the more hardcore homeless, and that needs to be looked at from both mental health and drug addiction issues that we're all very aware of, and closing down many facilities that used to deal with that problem. You have the low-income people that are in the middle tranche that are struggling to pay rent and just make ends meet, and large percentage of their income going to housing. And then you have people that are earning a very good wage that are just kind of getting worn out of what it takes to own a home here, and their housing costs and traffic issues. And those people, there's an outward migration of those people to other states that are maybe a little more affordable, a little less congestion, and that's a separate and distinct issue on its own. So all three of those have different solutions that need to be looked at. So it's a little bit more complex than just one issue.
Great, thanks. And Sula, you're about to graduate and going to work in commercial real estate, hopefully in the Bay Area. What goes through your mind when you think about these statistics?
Gotta be honest, it's a little scary. I'm going into a 100% commission job, so I might be a little housing insecure for a little bit. But I think that's...
Let's hope for just a small bit.
But, I think Santa Clara University has done a really excellent job in preparing us for the workforce and for giving students the flexibility to either, migrate out into these less expensive areas, or, if they are going to stay, to get good jobs that help alleviate the problem a little bit. And it's a big problem, but where there's a problem, there's also a big solution. And so I'm excited to be part of working on the solution here.
Great. Well, Stan, you've been part of the solution. So what sparked you to become part of the solution for the housing crisis here in Silicon Valley?
Well, I've been involved for a long time, and I've seen a lot of different angles on it. And my son, who's was a junior at St. Francis High School in Mountain View, came home one night and said, my religion teacher is moving out of the area. And he came home a week later and said, my lacrosse coach is moving out of the area. My history teacher is moving. He said, what's going on? And because he really had a bond to these people. They were mentors to him. And so we started the discussion, and then we were in Palo Alto seeing the RVs parked along the street, and they're not homeless people. They're people gainfully employed in the nursing industry at Stanford University that have to commute in that way. So he got interested. We started something called Housing for All, and that program is partnered with Housing Industry Foundation, who's been in the nonprofit business of helping people in homelessness for 30 years as our partner. And it really is a program where we went back to market rate housing providers in the Bay Area on the apartment side and said, you have a big complex, 200 units. We've looked at it for many years. There's any given point in time 3 or 4 or 5 vacancies in those units. Donate those to us at 50% of market rent. So the 3,600 or 2,600, whatever that community is, that rent gets cut in half, and it's 1,300. And it's targeted towards those people that are working, providing amazing things for our community, the teachers, the healthcare givers, the first responders. And we launched it about 1.5 years ago, and to date, we have provided about $800,000 worth of relief. So it's great to meet these people that we've saved from having to move out of the area that were paying way too much. So it's been very rewarding. Surprisingly, it's a little more difficult to source and match the applicants with the donated units, and we're working through that, but that was part of an education for us, so we're really excited and happy that it's working.
Great. Well, congratulations. Thanks for at least providing something and moving forward with that. That's really exciting.
Thank you.
CJ, you've been doing research on this area. What do you see as Silicon Valley's path forward?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think the path forward is going to vary a little bit depending on who we're thinking about. So building on what Stan was saying in terms of these different market segments, in terms of housing affordability needs, we have low-income renters. And I think the path forward is really going to involve preserving existing affordable units, whether they're subsidized units or things like mobile home parks. We're going to be thinking about things like what subsidies work and when. For more moderate income households and market rate housing, we might think about regulatory barriers like high parking requirements, density restrictions, political factors that may delay or even prohibit new housing construction in certain cities. So I like to think about this research in terms of kind of the lower cost, lower income housing solutions, and then thinking about some of the barriers to market rate housing.
On that, Stan, what are the barriers here, and what are maybe some of the solutions? You've been here for a while.
Yes, I have. I think, again, it's in the mid-'80s, we had a partnership between both the federal government, state government, cities, and developers that worked very well. And they developed a lot of inclusionary housing where the 80% was market rate, 20% was below market. And they offset the loss in the rental income on the 20% with tax abatements for property taxes, tax credits for financing packages, below market rate interest rates on bonds. And it was a very good partnership, and it worked very well. Since the mid-'80s, not so well. I think we had two players. We had the developer, and we had the cities asking for the developer to include low-income housing, but not really giving them anything back. Well, we know how that played. 30 years, it's been very, very poor production of affordable housing as a result of that. The good news is now that I think they understand it. So there's a lot of movements to float new bonds. There's changes in the entitlement process where they're allowing a little more density. I think they're becoming more and more educated to that. They certainly speak to it. Now we need to find out if they're willing to make the difficult decisions and react to that when they get a lot of pushback from the neighboring communities about density and things like that. So I think density is part of the solution. I think a partnership, unfortunately, as I told my son when we were discussing this, the problem is the only person in the room for the past 30 years that seems like they have any money was the developer. The feds are out of money, they were deficit spending, the state was out of money, the cities were struggling, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to require that, and we're ramping that up. The reservoir is drained way down. We can't fill it with one or two garden hoses. We need many, many fire hoses, and they're coming. Google and the tech companies are pledging. The state's pledging money. The governor's buying in. The cities are starting to allow a little bit more density, even though that's slow. So we're seeing a lot of different spigots turn back on. The biggest change is one of economic expansion, and we're having a very good run right now, and that creates a difficult problem to catch up in that environment.
Right.
Good hard recession, that catches us up rapidly, but I'm not sure that he is
Sully doesn't
really
want to hear
excited
good
about
hard
that.
recession.
No.
Sully, what have you learned from CJ's class? I understood you took it, and beyond SCU. How do you see yourself making an impact on the issue of affordable housing?
Yeah, so I took CJ's Sustainable Urban Planning class, and for any students watching, I highly encourage anyone to take his class. I think it's very cross-disciplinary. It touches business, economics, anthropology, environmental studies. It's very informative, and I think that it would be beneficial for anybody in any field. And when we think about this issue, it seems so big, and that only the city or developers or people with a lot of money can make a big impact. But I think something that I learned from your class is a lot of active citizenship, and that is something that anybody can do. And so, two of the things that I'm trying to do is to just have more genuine, open dialogues with people, whether it's the public and the private sector, whether it's people in city council, whether it's just everyday residents. We're just trying to foster empathy for people who this is a real problem for, and I think that is a big part of the solution. And also just getting involved in local politics, whether it's going to community meetings or getting involved with the city council. I think that a voice can be very loud, and it can start a conversation which could make really big changes in the city. And so one way I'm trying to do that is by joining the Santa Clara Downtown Precise Task Force, I think it's called, and it's basically to help plan the revitalization of downtown. And so it's a lot of city planning and trying to understand what the community needs, and I want my voice to advocate for more affordable housing, and whether that comes through smaller units or below market units. I think that my voice can be a big change there.
Very interesting. CJ, why don't you tell us more?
Appreciate the free publicity here.
Free publicity for CJ's class. But why don't you tell us more about the other classes taught or this class taught and the research that's being done across Santa Clara?
Absolutely. I think Sully's point about my class being really interdisciplinary is an important one, because I think that the research and teaching here is around affordable housing issues and housing affordability has to be interdisciplinary, because this is a problem that is really difficult to solve, and it's going to take people, from public health and from business and from environmental studies and environmental sciences and urban planning. And so I think my approach and I've been very heartened to see faculty from across the university working from their perspectives and together on these issues. So 2 examples from my own research, which I'm most familiar with, are I'm working with 2 faculty in the economics department looking at how San Jose's urban village policy is affecting various housing market outcomes. So we bring kind of our different perspectives to think about the impacts and unintended consequences of a local policy like that. I mean, another example is I'm working with several public health faculty led by Jamie Chang, looking at homelessness and homeless deaths and the distribution of that in Santa Clara County. So thinking about some of these like market rate policies, some of these policies that are going to affect low-income and homeless people as well.
I love the idea that it's very interdisciplinary.
Absolutely.
Stan, from an industry perspective, what do you see Santa Clara's role in doing? And thank you again for being on our Real Estate Advisory Board.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, the kids are amazing, and Karen, you're amazing. So it's great environment to be here. But no, I think it's great because we're educating these kids, and that pays 2 different benefits. I think that in many ways this is not complex.
Right.
It's difficult to solve, but it's really a math equation. And I think it's important for our young people to understand that getting active and getting emotional is a good thing when you get blipped on your cell phone about something that's going on, but make sure that you understand the math of this. And Santa Clara educates them in the real estate program about what it takes to build a financially viable project, so it actually comes out of the ground and houses people. And if you take that project and say, well, now we're going to take it from 100% market rate and we're going to take away a significant portion of your income because you're going to put 20% at very low rents, that's great. But if now the math doesn't add up, then it all shuts down.
Right.
And that's where we've been for 30 years. So their education about real life experiences, which I think maybe we can enroll many of the people in the entitlement process in, and some of the other people, so that we all have that education. The other thing that happens is that it just prepares them to help us solve the problem. And they're very well prepared. And to give Sully a little comfort in coming out. I have 2 daughters now that are gainfully employed, and one went through Santa Clara and another school here in California, and they're thriving. They're doing wonderful. They've been well prepared. They're actually, my daughter that was here at Santa Clara moved to the very affordable housing community of Manhattan, and so I don't know why that happened, but she's actually saving money and doing well. So I have all the confidence in the world that the graduates will be well prepared, and hopefully then they reach out and solve the problem for the people we were trying to help, the teachers and those that are on the lower rung. But it will be, they're going to be very well prepared for this.
Great, thank you. We have a question from the audience, and for those of you on Facebook and LinkedIn, if you'd like to start posting your questions right now, we'll answer as many as we can. So the first question from the audience is, please discuss more about the Real Estate Institute at Santa Clara University. And we've mentioned it a couple of times, but I'm very excited about our Real Estate Institute. We started about 3 years ago. We have a very robust real estate minor. We have a robust real estate student association. We support faculty research in the Real Estate Institute. And we also do an annual symposium in May that's supported by our real estate board members, career fairs, etc. So we're growing our real estate program here. And part of that growth is tackling this affordable housing, which is one aspect of what we're doing. Affordable housing is very important to Santa Clara University and to our new president, Father Kevin O'Brien, as he focuses on access and affordability and sustainability. We also have a $5 million goal for funding the Real Estate Institute in the Innovating with the Mission, the campaign for Santa Clara University, and the impact it will have on our current students and future generation. So with that, we are very excited about where we're going, and if you'd like to support it, we'll post the website at the end of this podcast. So that's great. Another question, why doesn't new unit construction targeted at higher income brackets create more opportunities for lower income families in the existing housing vacated by those that can afford newer housing? Why doesn't build work? Stan?
Well,
Because I have no idea.
I think it goes back again to the economic vibrance and the economic cycles. It's like, we can control certain things, but you can't jump in the Colorado River with a little inner tube, yellow inner tube, and think you can control the flow. Example of that is I mentioned that the Santa Clara County rents from 2001 to 2011 were the same. There was no rent growth in that period over that 10-year period. Jagged spikes up and down. The average rent declined in 2002 and 2003 30%. Very little being built during that time period. It was all a demand-driven equation. So how do we change the supply equation? It was we build the new buildings. It used to be that people would move up into those new buildings and vacate the older properties. What's happened is it's just a classic example of an overheated economy. And so you have to be careful what you hope for. Traffic 6-7 years ago, well, maybe more than that now, but certainly 2007 and 8 in the Great Recession, you could zip all over the Bay Area with ease. So we have to remember that it's a long-term journey, and what we've got here in the Bay Area is unprecedented economic expansion, and now that's the term of that expansion is unprecedented as well. It creates tremendous rip currents, if you will. So that's where we are. Also, there's been a lot of renovation of these older projects. So people will come in and renovate them and raise the rents on the older ones as well. Everything's new, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 put in. There's a benefit to that. The housing stock is better than it's ever been. But it continues to put pressure on the people that aren't being pulled up by wage growth in this area. Which is significant. These tech firms have to pay huge salaries to these people graduating from Santa Clara, and that solves the problem,
Right.
To some degree. But those that are left behind in the middle tier, not so much. Now that's growing significantly now. You try and get a plumber to come fix your plumbing.
Yeah.
That's 2x what it was 7 or 8 years ago. We have to solve the teacher problem. Either you're going to provide them housing or their wages are going to go up. Because sooner or later, it just breaks down to the point where you have to take drastic measures. So it solves it, but it doesn't solve it simultaneously. The problems get very deep and painful before the solutions arrive.
He mentioned parking and transportation. CJ, did you want to add something to that?
Sure, I might talk about both of those
Sure,
too. Two things I wanted to just add to what Stan was saying are, we've been in a housing shortage in California for decades, and so building now is really just trying to catch up for our lost time. To the extent that luxury housing kind of filters down in the housing market to add to the supply for more moderate income households, it's still not going to probably serve the households that are lower income and need it the most. And that's kind of our most severe housing shortage there. Parking, which I think oftentimes we think about as kind of a very, ordinary day-to-day topic.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I've been involved with research that has looked nationally at the effects of parking requirements on housing affordability, and we found that across the country, urban renters are spending almost 20% of their rent kind of implicitly in parking that's required to be with their units. So, maybe people would choose to have a more affordable unit and forego the parking if we have other options. And also we found that when cities reduce parking requirements, it reduces the amount of parking that developers provide. So that's one small way that we can try to address housing affordability issues.
We had another question, I think for you, Sully, about what did you learn at Santa Clara with our Jesuit values here that really inform your thinking about affordable housing and the real estate industry?
Good question. As Stan was saying, we're very well set up to go into pretty high-paying jobs, maybe not a commission broker, but the majority of students at Santa Clara University. And so to be aware that there's a larger problem, and it's a problem of social justice, that there are people who are stuck on those lower rungs of the ladder who we need to help bring up, and those are the people who need affordable housing and who need people to advocate for them. And so having empathy for those types of people and just general awareness of the problem and, to care enough to do something about it, I think that is a very Santa Clara Jesuit value.
Thank you. Stan, you've mentioned, another question, you've mentioned the entitlement process and the economics of housing construction as contributors to the affordability challenge. Would you please expand on these concepts, including proposals that would improve the housing supply?
Yeah, I think the big one has been a density increase in many communities, and CJ and I discussed this earlier. That increase has gone from 20 to 30 units per acre way back in the 90s and 80s to 40 to 50 units per acre in many communities recently, and now talk of areas near transit, et cetera, going to 80 or 90 units per acre. We just transacted a bunch of property up in Redwood City downtown that did just a spectacular job of providing housing. They essentially entitled the land before they sold it to the developer. The city did, and it took out a huge impediment, which is a CEQA, which is intended to be environmental protection law, but is frequently used abusively by unions and other players in the game that try to prevent people from moving forward in an expedient manner. Redwood City took that out. They built density as high as 90 units per acre. It's right downtown walkable. It's right adjacent to the train station. Beautiful buildings. So you build density, you do it tastefully, you do it in the right areas. I think that's a big part of it. And then you just understand there's trade-offs. The people, there's many sides to this argument, but do you want density? Well, when we're all stuck on a 2-hour commute, the density is not that great, and especially if it's not proximate to jobs. So, if you live in a community and somebody comes and says, I want to put in a 5-story affordable housing project next to you, and 30% of it's going to be hardcore homeless, some of which have issues with drugs and different things. Do you want that? Are you willing to bite that bullet to solve the housing crisis? So those are the tough decisions. And the young people and everybody, make sure you ask the tough question to the politicians about how the math works, not superficially. To me, to house homeless on the Embarcadero in San Francisco seems crazy, because that's, you can move that 4 blocks. Is all you have to do is get off the waterfront, and the cost of your real estate underlying that housing goes down by 300 or 400%. So you can house more people. So tough questions about where and why and how. And it's going to get real, because we've pretended and we've whistled through the graveyard for 30 years here now, and it's starting to get more real, which is exciting. At least we've got the focus.
Excellent. Another question, and I don't know who would want to answer this. How much does foreign investment contribute to price inflation? And does California have any leverage to reduce such foreign investment with the goal of aligning real estate values with local income?
I can take a stab at it. I think probably it might be one factor among many, but I think the biggest issues in terms of our housing affordability crisis have to do with not enough supply, not enough subsidies, not enough targeted local policies at creating the housing that we need. So my understanding is, it is probably one factor, but probably not the one that
that's driving it.
Yeah, that's driving it.
Yeah, I would concur as well. Yeah, the job swings in the .com meltdown in the early 2000s, we lost in 24 months over 200,000 jobs in the Bay Area. Well, for every job that's created, they say that you create, as much as 2.5 to 3 households. So you're talking about 600,000 households that are impacted by that move. We lost a similar amount in the Great Recession, and since that time, we've expanded, and call it the 3 major MSAs in the Bay Area, well over 300,000 jobs. So those are the massive movements. These other things, drop in the bucket here and there, but I don't think that's the major one.
Another question, should government bring back some form of public housing?
That's a great question. I'll take it.
And CJ can take it, yeah.
I think, we've gone much more as a society toward giving people vouchers that are portable rather than building public housing. I think the benefit of public housing is if you do it right, and we've seen this in other countries, particularly some Western European countries. We've seen examples where, it can be an investment in a neighborhood. It can provide permanent affordable housing units. I think the big question is whether it's public housing or using some of the site-based programs we have now, like the low-income housing tax credit. The big question is, like, how do you invest in neighborhoods that have been underinvested in and use it as a tool to help the lives of the people there? Yeah. So public housing may be part of it, or some other program that helps direct investment. And I think the other side of it is giving people options where they can live, whether it's in the community they're in now or elsewhere where they may have different opportunities.
Yeah. I think integrating it, we've got many old studies in Chicago and other places where you had large blocks of public housing, and that didn't work out well for anybody. I think integrated partnerships that we talked about that worked so well in the 80s, recognizing that money needs to be applied for that. I mean, you need to ask tough questions of, if we're building a $2 or $3 billion tech campus that generates $50 or $60 million a year of tax revenue, where's that money going, and how can that be allocated to housing and education and different things, and ask the tough questions. Why in the most economic, vibrant area and event in the history of the planet, maybe in the Bay Area here, and I don't say that lightly, why are we not able to solve the homeless problem and the housing problem and some of the problems that we're not solving around here? Very tough questions. You guys will be answering all those questions.
Right. So solely, we would like you to solve that. You and your
yeah. So I think it's a partnership, and I think that will work well and serve the people the best going forward, rather than kind of getting them all in blocks. And I think that the people that can execute the development of those projects is not the public sector.
Okay. Another question, since labor costs are another key factor with affordable housing, has off-site construction, or what people term modular housing with low-cost options, being considered? So you said you saw some modular housing?
I have. There's some very interesting modular companies out there. I don't think that currently their technology is good enough to be that much cheaper, but definitely I've been to one company where they say 50% cheaper, 50% faster. And so I think if they can get there, it will be an amazing innovation for even affordable housing. So, just different ways to solve the problem, and modular construction could definitely be one of them.
Okay. Stan, CJ, anything to add to that?
I would just concur. That's the front end claims have not panned out to be the back end reality. And that's why you're not seeing more of it. There's sometimes floor plan challenges with that. We've sold a number of those, but and they're working on it. I think there's bigger benefits in the entitlement process and those tough decisions, and it's difficult to require things like solar panels and removing gas as a way to heat your home, because that's environmentally sound and long-term is beneficial, but that drives up the cost. Yeah. So you got, again, tough decisions. Do I want that or do I want this? But to sit back and polarize and think you can have both is really a flaw. And we seem to do that in all political arenas now. So I think productivity occurs in the middle, and that's what I would encourage everybody to do, is force people, city, states, Fed, back to getting stuff done in the middle, and that will help.
The next question is, what is Santa Clara University doing for our own faculty, staff, and students to open up affordable housing solutions? Since I'm in the hiring season for faculty, this is near and dear to my heart, as well as with staff. And so I can talk a little bit about it from an administrative point of view, and maybe CJ, you can add in. I know that we have a project out of the Provost's office, which actually is aimed at providing down payments or helping people with down payments on their housing because of the cost of getting into housing, and then being able to split or share whatever proceeds from any sale that would occur later. One of the ones that I'm really excited about is a project on property that Santa Clara owns. There's 290 units that will go up that can house faculty and staff. That's units, not beds. And so that really helps with families that want to live close. That one is also a mixed use, so we've already added an incubator in our Seoka Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship to help with that, and there'll be some retail space, et cetera. Now, CJ, do you have anything to add to that since you moved here?
Yeah. I kind of joke that I'm both somebody who researches the housing market and I'm also part of it too. So, building on what Karen was saying about the faculty and staff housing, I think that's something that's going to be near transit, and that's another way that we can think about how to help SCU faculty and staff live closer to where they work. So that seems like a great opportunity. But the interesting thing is, for me, thinking of the statistics in a county where the median income is $125,000, many faculty and staff fall into the low income or category. So how do you match some of their housing needs with what is the market rate stock?
Well, and I remind people we're also hiring, just like Google and Facebook and everybody else, from a national market. Mm-hmm. So we're competing with other places in the Midwest and other places where the cost of living is significantly cheaper.
Absolutely.
So, that really brings us to the end. So I want to thank everybody for participating. I really want to thank CJ and Stan and Soli for sharing your stories and perspectives. And if there's those of you in the audience who want to learn more about our real estate programs and the Real Estate Institute, please visit campaign.scu.edu and you can get a lot more information. Our next Inside SCU is April 20th, and we will be discussing what can Silicon Valley learn from Santa Clara University and our Jesuit traditions. So we hope you can join us then, and until then, go Broncos. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much.